Hey, y'all. Welcome to the Bless Your Books vlog. I'm Stephanie Edwards. I'm a romantic suspense author based in Knoxville, Tennessee. And this evening, I have my co host, Courtney Turner Hoyle, with me and Miss Nanette Kreitzman. Nanette, we'd love for you to talk about your books. Tell us what you're up to.
Okay. Um, Again, my good name is Nanette Kreitzman. I'm a short story writer, and I have so far 24 published short stories that I have published individually and in collections as well. I do them in collections of 5 stories each. And I just keep coming up with different ideas and seeing where they take me. I'm usually as surprised as the reader where it goes.
Yeah, I love that. So have you explored with your short stories using Kindle Vella?
No, I haven't, because my understanding of Kindle Vella is that it is a serial, it's a continuing story. And I do have 2 sequels to stories I've written, but overall, each story is completely separate and unrelated to the others.
Oh, that's really interesting. I'll have to read those because I'd love to see how you kind of flow into the next one. Um, well, I'm going to let Courtney introduce herself now and take it from there.
Okay.
Okay, I'm Courtney Turner Hoyle. I write a little bit of everything, multi-genre writer. So I have paranormal suspense, paranormal mysteries, but I also have Appalachian mysteries, Southern fiction, romance, time travel romance, just anything that you can imagine. I've probably written it, or I will write it. So my question for you, Miss Nanette,
Yes.
is what tell us about your travels. Where did you come from, and how did you end up where you are today?
Well, I came from my mommy. No, I was actually born in Salt Lake City, Utah, but my mom left that area with my sisters and I when I was too young to remember it. I grew up in Petersburg, Virginia, and I lived there until 1985, and then moved to Southern California and have gotten quite acclimated to the weather out here and find 50 degrees freezing cold. So you guys with your minus whatevers, I sympathize, empathize, and better you than me is all I can say. But as far as travels, I have been a lot of places when we had younger children. They're grown now, but when we had younger children, we had a travel trailer, and we would go to a lot of the national parks on the western part of the country. And now we have a recent purchase of a motorhome, and we hope to go everywhere, anywhere that we can reach by road, into Canada, Alaska, the East Coast, West Coast, North, South. We want to see it all.
Well, that's great. You'll have to come down to Tennessee and see us.
Oh, well, my family lives in Virginia, so I'm going to be there hopefully this summer at some time. So we'll
That
see.
was great.
Yeah.
So why did you start writing? What was your inspiration?
I've always loved words. I just, whether reading them, playing with them, and for my whole life, I have come up with little scenes. I guess I've always been short spoken when it comes to words, but not when I speak. If my husband could hear this, he would agree to that. But when it comes to writing, I'm pretty much short with everything, and I've always been that way. And I would come up with little scenes and couldn't think of anything beyond that. And then when my kids grew up and moved out of the house and I had more real estate space in my head, I guess the characters decided they could move in, and stories came about, full-blown stories in short form. And Stephanie, to speak to what you were saying earlier, they are all completely separate stories. They do not connect in any way except for the 2 sequels that I have done. So it pops in my head. I can't even tell you what inspires it. It just pops in my head. It's like a little movie, and I just take notes so I don't forget, because I have a lousy memory, and then later play with the words, which is what I love so much.
Well, that's really great, and it's really good that you have characters that you love and that you can hear so
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite book that you've written?
It's always the one I'm writing usually. It flip-flops because I have, and also like you, Courtney, all of my books are so very different. I've covered lots of genres. I have genres I couldn't even put a name to because they're just kind of out there. And I love some for how off the wall they are, and I love others for how deeply emotional they are, and I love others just for how intriguing and mysterious they can be. But all of them, while I'm writing them, definitely, because that's when I have the fun just playing with the words and trying to get those building blocks in just the right order to make something pretty to look at.
Now, I have read some of your books, and
Thank you.
I mean, I have some that I really just truly enjoyed.
Thank you.
And I think it was Drafting Murder.
Yeah, that's a popular
really
one.
Loved.
That's one of
But
my
I want to read The Judge, and I think that I have it from the last time you did one of your free sales on Amazon, and I'm really interested in reading that one. And then was it Grizzly Cravings?
Yeah, that was one of my more recent ones.
Yes, and I'm really interested in reading that one too. That one looks really good.
That's one of those ones that's kind of hard to categorize because it is horror-ish, but it's also very nostalgic. It's got that old feel to it because it's memories of a child with her grandfather. And so I don't know. I don't try to put any square pegs into any round hole. I just, whatever comes in my head is what I write. And I don't try to make it any particular direction. So
to piggyback off that, where do you get your ideas for your story?
I wish I could tell you. It usually happens. The ideas usually originate when I'm on a walk. It's like I leave the house by myself with my dog. We'll leave the house by ourselves. And then next thing I know, I've got people with me whispering in my ear, telling me what's going on. And I will be whipping out my phone, dictating stuff so I don't forget it. And then Siri likes to play jokes with me because she doesn't always transcribe what I say. So then I have to try to figure out what it is I tried to say. So that's always fun. But the ideas will like originate then, but then they'll germinate and become more in depth and become more involved when I'm in the shower. And that's not as convenient to take notes then. So I have to try to remember. But it's weird because it's like the characters introduce themselves on the walk, but then they want to get really up close and personal when I'm vulnerable in the shower. So that's just the way they are. They're an odd lot.
Characters don't have a lot of respect for boundaries.
No, not at all. But as far as what inspires anything in particular, one story obviously had an obvious inspiration, and that was When a Good Man Dies, because my husband retired last summer as a police officer, and When a Good Man Dies is about a husband who was killed in the line of duty, and that was a couple of years before he retired, and I had been living with that very real fear because in the Los Angeles area, it's not the best place to be a police officer, and there was a very real fear hanging over me for the 30 years that he was a police officer that we've been married. And that was very cathartic. I shed a lot of tears on the writing of that story, but it was very cathartic. So, but now he's retired. So.
Is the main character from that story one of your favorites, would you say?
That's a hard question. You ask the deep probing questions. I don't know, because she spends the whole time grieving, and that's not where I want to live. So I wouldn't say that's a favorite character of mine to have. I enjoy the sarcastic characters. I really enjoy the husband-wife dynamic in Drafting Murder that you were talking about before, because they're just full of banter and picking on each other. And that's very much how my husband and I are. We pick on each other a lot, but it can be fun if you do it right. So most of the time, my characters who I wish I could be, who I wish I had the guts to be, the chutzpah to be, or I'm not sure how else to express that. I do much better when I have about an hour to make a sentence perfect. So
We're writers. We're not.
yes, you get it.
Yeah, I feel the same way. I'd rather text someone than call them, because then I can piece it together much better.
Yes.
You have made some Instagram posts about your horses, or the horses that you've come in contact with.
Yes.
Would you like to talk about riding and how
Sure.
that feels for you?
I currently do not have horses in my life, but when I was a kid, I took riding lessons. I learned English, and then moving to the West Coast, I started riding in Western style, and I would ride whenever I had the opportunity. But then when my kids were small, my husband gifted me with a trip to Gila, New Mexico at a working cattle ranch. And I'm not talking one of these high toity places. This was a working cattle ranch, and I worked, but it was so much fun. And we barrel raced, and we herd cattle, and we even shot from horseback. That was my favorite. They had set up a balloon target course, and I would shoot galloping the horse. I'd be shooting at the targets. Every time I missed one, I was so upset. But anyway, but that was just such a wonderful experience for me. And I knew I needed horses in my life more after that. So I found a rescue in close to me in Southern California and volunteered there for probably about 10 years. And I really enjoyed that experience. But unfortunately, the horses that were there as a rescue for a reason, and they weren't well trained. And I was only working with them once a week. And I wasn't a trainer. So it wasn't always the safest experience, although it was a lot of fun and I loved it. But as I got older, the ground got harder for some reason. So I decided it was probably about time I stopped. But last November, my son treated me to a horse weekend where we went on a trail ride. And that was a wonderful experience. But my horse spooked and I fell, reminding me that maybe it's best that I'm not on horses anymore. But that was more of an injury to pride than an injury to myself, because I knew better. I wasn't prepared. I was being lazy. It was a nose to tail trail ride. I thought it would be fine, but the wind took my hat off and I caught it and it freaked the horse. And next thing I know, I was on the ground and my son thought I had died. But beside that, it was a great weekend. But they have, to answer your question, how it relates to my writing, they have made their way into some of my stories. Probably the most obvious of that would be Spitfire's Gift, about a bronc rider who wanted to retire but ended up getting a horse sort of by accident, and how that introduced him to a love interest. So that was fun to write.
That sounds really nice. So do you like adding romance or romantic elements to your stories?
There are a couple of my stories that may not fit the propriety that some readers would like to have. Most of them are very clean. Most of them, the romance is a side item, not the main item, because romance is a part of everything.
Sure.
But most of them are clean. There are a couple that get a little racy, but even so, I wouldn't call it X-rated. I try to make it somewhat clean reading, even though it gets a little spicy. But I'm just trying to think. I've got my stack of stories here, and I'm trying to think if there's any that are specifically just love stories and nothing else. I think I can't think any of them are strictly a love story. Most of them are, the love story is just a byproduct or a side of what's really going on. Go ahead.
What about the, I don't know how to say this without giving anything away. The woman who's running from something. I read that
Accountability.
one. Yes.
Accountability. Yes, that is definitely a love story. But again, the love story is not the main focus, or it's not the only focus, I should say. So, but that does have a nice little twist at the end. Most of my stories have the weird little twist at the end. So, but that's what's fun about them.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I like about reading your work, is the twist at the end.
Thank
and
you.
That's certainly something that we should bring out in this interview, is that your work does have something unique at the end. So readers should try it. It is they are short stories.
Yes.
So you'll have, the short digestible bits, but then you'll be able to bring that all in together.
Well, it is a full story. It is a full story with the beginning, middle, and end. So it's not flash fiction.
No.
Most of them are 30 minutes to 45 minutes long. Most of them closer to 30. But yeah, you mentioned the judge. You'll have to let me know what you think of the twist at the end of there, because I was surprised by that one. So
I love that. I love when it works out so well that you're even surprised when you write it.
I don't plan anything. It evolves as I'm writing, and I'm sure you guys know what that's like. I'm definitely a pantser. I will write down the ideas so I don't forget, but then even those ideas change as the story evolves, and they start talking to me when I'm in the shower, because that's what they do. So.
I have an author friend who buys the bathtub chalk.
Oh, what
you would buy for a kid, and she writes her notes.
Oh, what a shower! Because that's where I get really scared. Is that the epiphanies always the ideas come on the walks, but the epiphanies, where the story all of a sudden comes together and makes sense, is in the shower, and I'm always afraid I'm going to forget by the time I get out. So no, that's a great idea, Alan. Put on the shopping list, shower chalk.
We may see his arm again.
Or hear his voice.
No, I doubt you'll hear his voice. No. He is definitely camera shy when it comes to the public eye. So,
speaking of being in the public eye, how do you feel about reader interaction, either virtually, like we're doing now, and maybe you have a Facebook page or group that you're active in, or even in person if you were going to do an event at your local library? How do you feel about doing those sorts of things?
I've never had the opportunity for any of those kinds of things, other than one other interview similar to this online. I really haven't put myself out there in that way. My only social media is Instagram, and I love interacting with and meeting authors, because that is where I get to know fellow authors, because I don't know any in the real life. And it's just been such a joy to know that my weird, quirky brain isn't me, it's the writer. Because all of you guys are the same too, and it makes me feel like I'm not so alone in the crazy, But I don't know. I hadn't even thought of doing anything like a library or anything like that. I wouldn't even know where to start. I have a handful of regular readers, maybe 5 or 6, that pretty much grab up anything that I write, and that is more than I ever thought I would have. So that is just as exciting to me as anything could be. And then whoever else wants to have interest in checking them out, that's, I don't like calling it a hobby, because it's too passionate to be just a hobby, but it's definitely not a career, and I don't intend to make it a career per se. I'm not expecting to ever make money off of it, but at least I'm not in the hole, because I don't spend money on it either. But just to get feedback for the people who have read, to hear what they thought of it, which has been predominantly positive for all of them, which is a wonderful experience. That just, it's validation. And I know you guys know what that means, to know that, okay, so it's not just me. There is something there. So, and Stephanie, I haven't read anything of yours yet, but I say yet because I'm an avid indie supporter. Courtney, I've read yours and love yours. So it's just too many books and too little time.
Yeah, I'll definitely be reading some of your work too. And short stories fit into my schedule, so I can definitely.
I got a lot of them.
Do that. Yeah,
and it's, as far as being an indie supporter and being connecting with other authors, I have championed on Instagram #Indie Feature Friday. And that is where I encourage people to share the indie books they love. And I do emphasize the books they love, because this is a supportive community that we are a part of. And I don't say, don't review a book if you don't like it, just don't put it under that hashtag, please, because it is about support and love. And it has grown and had a life of its own. And that's been very exciting for me to see. And I always try to, I try to read a book a week. Sometimes I get in a little longer one, but because I'm not the fastest of readers, because I like savoring the stuff I'm reading. And I also like to have a little time to write. But I do try to share a book every week, and I love seeing other people doing the same thing. So that's really exciting for me.
That's wonderful.
Yes,
Yeah.
and when you say that you, I mean, you did start this, and it really has taken off. I've seen other authors, even as far as the UK, share this same hashtag that you're speaking about. You have
Yeah.
a decent following on Instagram. You've downplayed yourself, but you really there are more people that follow you and that pay attention to what you're saying than you realize. And you have a very, it seems like it's very regimented the way that you put out your Instagram posts, like you do certain things on a certain day. So how did you come to terms with how you were going to do that as opposed to making other posts? When did you make that jump, and what made you do it?
Basically, especially during the pandemic. I mean, I started writing at the time. I'm a stay-at-home mom, and when my kids left the house, I had a lot of time and not much to do with it. So I had to figure out what I wanted to do at this time, and that's when I started playing with words a little more and realized I had more than just that one scene in me, and started writing the stories. And then when I joined Instagram as a fluke and found all these other, because I had never been on social media ever before this account that I have on Instagram. At that time, being new to social media, everybody was saying you should post every day to get that following, to get, and algorithms and all that stuff. Anybody that's been on it long enough knows that you can try all these different formulas and you're not going to find anything that works all the time. But it did make me think, okay, well, if I am going to post frequently, I don't want to keep posting the same memes that everybody else is posting. I don't want to post a bunch of personal stuff because, that guy over there with the arm. But I wanted to post things that would be of interest as well. So if I'm working on a project, which I have been steadily working on a project for many years now, I have a weekly excerpt of what I'm working on every week. And then another thing I have is an excerpt for something I've already published, trying to get other people engaging with it. How would you finish this line? And if you want to know how I finished it, well, here's my link. But if what would you do with this? And there've been some really interesting comments on that one. And then I used to do like I'm trying to remember what I called it now, like a metaphor, but then I ran out of ideas for that. So that is now a word, what a word means to me, because I do love words so much. And then of course there's the hashtag Into Feature Friday. And then I do phrase origins, like where does a particular, I've lost what they're called. Help me out, Courtney. What is it? When like let the cat out of the bag, idiom. You can edit that one out, Stephanie. Where certain idiom phrases originate. And because I love words and a lot of people like that, learning those things too, I research those and see where they've come from. And then of course, Self Promote Sunday by Julie Embleton, which is a wonderful way to promote your work. And then my silly little odes I do on Mondays, just some silly little something, whatever crosses my mind. Some are more serious than others, but most of them tend to have a silly side to them. But just something to make it, I am a regimented person. So yeah, it is the same thing on every Monday, every Tuesday, every Wednesday. But I wanted to make something a little more interesting than just showing cat pictures, so that's where all that came up.
Yeah, well, people know what to expect from you, and I think that's nice and refreshing. If somebody enjoys a certain kind of post, they know, oh, every Tuesday Nanette posts this, so I can go check out her page then and interact, engage, maybe spur off some ideas of my own. And, it's just a nice way to have a community.
And see, that's what I'm in it for, as far as the social media goes. I mean, I honestly don't have a lot of sales for the social media to have influenced that, but the community, the camaraderie, the sharing of ideas, the laughter, the foibles, all of it, just having all you guys to share that with is magic. It's just because I have nobody in my real life that understands the way the brain works when you have this stuff going on, and to have that kind of community in a way that I can access at my fingertips is just marvelous. So thank you guys for being a part of that.
Well, I'm happy to be part of it. Have you had any comments that from readers about your work that have just really stuck with you, or really you just theme?
Something that has been a recurring theme that I see in reviews is how people say my books are like little novels, because as I said, I feel as a short story writer, I no pun intended, I fall short because most people, there may be a market for short stories, but most people want to sink their teeth into something that's going to take them a while. And to hear people say that my short stories read like a novel, they have the depth of a novel, means a lot to me, because I think they do have a lot of depth. They are, very few are in any way frivolous. I put a lot of feels into them. I dig deep. Like, for example, When a Good Man Dies that I mentioned before, that's just a heartbreaking story. And I've had many people tell me that they were in tears reading it. So I do put a lot of depth into it, even if it may be short. So when people have mentioned in reviews or talking to me that they can't believe it was a short story, that's what's meaningful to me.
That's great. Sounds like you found a really solid following among the people who are followers. So
yeah, it means it's more than I ever thought I would have. So it's exciting as far as that goes.
That's all we can ask for.
Yeah.
All the other stuff, any money that comes in.
Ultimately, we write for ourselves. Ultimately, we write for ourselves. But if anybody else also enjoys, even if it's just one person, if anybody else enjoys what we've done, it just makes it that much sweeter.
I agree. Wow. You give me a lot to think about. And I really have to check out all of your work. I'm really excited. Courtney, did you have any other questions that you wanted to ask?
Has anything that she wants to share specifically about her work, about anything that might be upcoming that you want people to keep an eye out for? Maybe talk about your newsletter that you send out.
It's not a newsletter. What I have is what I call my advanced notice team. And that is just a simple email. I always publish my stories a couple of weeks before I announce that they've been published on Instagram, because you never know what's going to happen. I don't want to have an announced date ready and then KDP has slowed down their roll or whatever else. Mm-hmm. So I always do that a little early. And a lot of people are, well, not a lot of people, the few people that read my stories regularly, I've had a couple of people say, hey, when is it coming out? When's it coming out? So I started my advance notice team where I send out an email to those people that are interested to know when the story is first published, even though I haven't publicly announced it yet. And I also give them a heads up when I do the free offers, which is every once in a while. Anytime I have a book anniversary, I do a free offer. And then on Christmas, I always do my latest collection. And I've started the habit on Mother's Day of doing all my former collections as a free offer. So that's included in the advance notice teams. They get a heads up on that, so they're aware it's coming. And as far as I forgot the other part of the question that you asked with that.
Upcoming work, your newest work that you'll have available.
I am working on the 5th story of what will be my next collection book. I have, as I said, 24 published stories, 20 of which are in collections of 5 each. I have 4 published with a 5th in the works that I'm working on now to make my 5th collection book. And the one I'm working on now is still, a work in progress, as it's called. And I'm not sure where it's going yet. It has to do with a dream person, somebody that's been haunting somebody's dream their whole lives and has become more a part of their life than anybody in the real world. So I'm not sure where it's going yet, but I'm having fun with it.
I read your excerpt on it when you posted that and asked if anyone had ever had an imaginary friend growing up.
Yeah.
So I think that one's going to be really interesting.
I'm finding it so. But I feel like I missed out because I never had an imaginary friend. And especially with writing this story, man, I really missed out. That could have been fun.
I was an only child, so that's all I had were imaginary friends.
I had 2 older sisters, and I think I would have been better off with imaginary friends.
Oh no.
Don't tell them I said that.
Oh.
I'm the oldest of 3, and my brother and sister once tied me to the dining room table.
Oh,
So
fun. Oh, fun.
imaginary would have been nice right about then.
Well,
They're very real.
I was an only child, but I had 7 children.
Well,
So
you made up for it.
yes, so I see some of these things in them, although I don't think they've tied each other to anything, but there's
Give
they
them
might be
time.
within
Give them
earshot, so don't give them any ideas.
Well, I have 2, and they are grown. And I originally wanted 3, but after the second one came along, I realized 2 was just fine. I don't know how you do with 7. Good for you.
Well, thank you. Thank you. There's more blessings than there are challenges. So I'm very lucky. They take it easy on me.
You are lucky.
Yeah. They seem like really good kids.
Thank you. They always say don't have more than you have hands.
Well, I did that. I had 1 for each.
Yeah. Yeah. Or that you don't let them outnumber you and your partner.
Mhm.
So that there's that idea, but well, I blew that all out of the water. I guess I'm working on a softball team.
Yeah, but you're smiling, so it can't be all bad.
And that's true. That's true.
Yes.
Well, it has been so much fun to have you here today.
Likewise. Thank you so much.
Yes. And Miss Stephanie, did you have a Southern phrase that you wanted to share this time?
I don't have one, but since Annette is our guest, do you have a favorite Southernism or a favorite
I grew up in
Southern
Virginia
dish
too.
or Southern city? Anything Southern?
My mom, who grew up in Virginia and then went west and came back, she always says, bless Pat this and bless Pat that. And I guess that's her terms for profanity, because she really doesn't cuss. So I always wanted to know who Pat was, because he got a lot of blessings in my house. But geez, I said y'all for growing up all the time. And it probably took 2 or 3 years living in California before I dropped that, and incessant teasing from my coworkers before I finally lost y'all. But geez, a favorite Southernism. If the Lord's willing and the creek don't rise.
There you go.
I still use that one, actually.
I actually know what that one means. Well, I mean, of course, the first part's pretty self-explanatory, but the other part is not only referencing floods, but there was a point in time when they thought the Native American Creek Indians or the Native American Creek would come in and possibly, threaten their way of living. And so that is why that saying has carried.
That's fascinating. Thank you for sharing that. Because I always thought it was flood. So that's very interesting. I like learning stuff like that. That's why I do my phrase origins on my Saturday post, because it's fun to learn little trivial things like that.
So true. That's awesome. Well, thank you both, and really enjoyed this conversation. And we look forward to next month's installment of Bless Your Books vlog.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
Bye.